I was staring at the water-stained ceiling of the Comfort Inn in Albany, wondering why corporate conferences always chose the shittiest hotels, when my phone buzzed. The notification lit up the dark room like a flare. 3:47 a.m. Nina never texted this late. Hell, Nina barely texted at all anymore. Just FYI, told everyone we're separated for now, a break just to figure things out. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. Separated. For now. Figure things out. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. 18 years of marriage, and she ends it with a text message while I'm 300 miles away at a facilities management seminar. Not even a phone call. Not even the courtesy of waiting until I got home. I sat up in the squeaky hotel bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. The digital clock cast red shadows across the cheap wallpaper. Outside, a truck rumbled past on the interstate, its engine noise fading into the distance like my marriage apparently had. For now, like this was some trial period, like I was a gym membership she could cancel if she wasn't satisfied. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. 1,000 responses ran through my head, from begging to rage to cold professionalism. Instead, I called her, straight to voicemail, of course. Nina, it's me. What the hell is this text supposed to mean? Call me back. I hung up and immediately dialed again. Voicemail. Again. The 3rd time, I didn't leave a message. I just listened to her voice telling me she wasn't available. Please leave a message after the beep. That same voice that used to whisper my name in the dark, that used to laugh at my terrible jokes, that used to say she loved me. Used to. I threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the bathroom door and clattered onto the industrial carpet. The screen cracked but still glowed, mocking me with its silence. 18 years. Our daughter Tess starting college this fall. The house we'd bought in Millbrook Heights with the mortgage we'd be paying for another 12 years. The joint checking account. The shared credit cards. The life we'd built together. Brick by brick, argument by argument, makeup session by makeup session. Gone. With a text. I got up and retrieved my phone, checking for damage. The crack ran diagonally across the screen like a scar. Fitting. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through my contacts. I needed to talk to someone, needed to make sense of this. But who? Most of our friends were couple friends, Nina's work people, the yoga crowd she'd gotten mixed up with over the past few months. Yoga. Christ. 6 months ago, Nina wouldn't have been caught dead in stretchy pants, talking about chakras and mindfulness. Now she went to classes 4 times a week, spent weekends at retreats, and spouted wellness bullshit like she'd been born in an ashram. And there was Dan. Dan the yoga instructor with his man bun and his organic smoothie recipes and his Instagram account full of shirtless meditation poses. Dan who Nina talked about constantly. Dan whose classes she never missed. Dan whose car I'd seen parked outside our building at odd hours when Nina was supposed to be at work. Dan. The pieces clicked together like a puzzle I'd been too stupid to solve. The late nights, the whispered phone calls, the sudden interest in finding herself, the way she'd started doing laundry separately, keeping her phone face down during dinner, picking fights about nothing just to storm out of the room. I wasn't losing my wife to some midlife crisis or communication breakdown. I was losing her to some wannabe guru with abs and a flexible schedule. The rage hit me like a physical thing, hot and sharp behind my sternum. I wanted to punch something, break something, drive home, and kick down Dan's door and show him what 18 years of marriage meant. Show him what happened when you screwed with Sam Morrison's life. Instead, I opened my laptop. If Nina wanted separation, she'd get it, but not on her terms. Not with me playing the role of the pathetic husband begging for another chance, while she figured out whether the yoga instructor was better in bed than the guy who'd been paying her bills for 2 decades. I logged into our joint checking account. $12,000. Not a fortune, but enough to make a statement. I transferred it to my personal account, the one Nina never looked at because I handled all the finances. Then I called the credit card companies and reported the cards lost. New cards would be sent to my work address within 3 business days. Next, I called our landlord. Old Mr. Gilroy answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep and irritation. "This better be important, Morrison." "It's Sam. I need to terminate our lease." "What?" "It's 4 a.m. I'm primary on the contract, 30 days notice as of today. We're moving out." There was a long pause. I could hear him shuffling around, probably looking for his glasses. "Your wife called yesterday about renewing for another year." "My wife doesn't speak for me. 30 days, Mr. Gilroy. I'll have the paperwork to you by end of week." "Sam, what's going on? You two having problems?" "You could say that." I hung up before he could ask more questions. Gilroy was the biggest gossip in the building. By noon, everyone would know the Morrisons were splitting up. Nina would hate that. She'd always been obsessed with appearances, with what people thought of us. Well, now she'd have something real to worry about. I spent the next hour on my laptop, methodically dismantling our shared life. I changed the address on all the utilities to my work office, canceled the cable and internet, put a hold on mail delivery, found a storage unit and scheduled a moving truck for the day I got back. By the time I was done, the sun was coming up outside the hotel window. I felt hollow and wired at the same time, like I'd been running on pure adrenaline for hours, which I had. My phone buzzed. A text from my old army buddy Mick. "Heard through the grapevine you're having woman trouble. You okay?" I stared at the message. Mick ran a gym downtown, the kind of place where guys worked out their problems with heavy weights and heavier drinking afterward. We'd stayed in touch over the years, but we weren't close. Not anymore. Not since I'd gotten married and moved to the suburbs and started living Nina's version of the American dream. "How'd you hear?" "Your wife's friend Ava was at the bar last night, talking loud about how you two are taking a break. Thought you should know." Ava, Nina's best friend from work, the one who'd introduced her to the yoga studio, the one who'd been encouraging Nina's journey of self-discovery and telling her she deserved to be happy, the one who'd probably been covering for Nina's affair from the beginning. I typed back, "Thanks for the heads up. Drink soon?" "Anytime, brother. You know where to find me." I closed the laptop and headed for the shower. The hot water felt good on my shoulders, washing away the hotel smell and the sleepless night. In a few hours, I'd sit through 8 hours of presentations about HVAC maintenance and building safety codes. I'd smile and nod and take notes like my world hadn't just imploded via text message. And then I'd drive home and show Nina what separation really looked like. The conference was torture. I sat in the back row of every session, checking my phone obsessively for calls or messages that never came. The presenters droned on about energy efficiency and regulatory compliance, while I mentally cataloged everything Nina and I owned together, everything that would need to be divided or fought over or abandoned. The house was in both our names, but I'd made the down payment with money from my Army disability settlement. The furniture was mostly hers, picked out during shopping trips I'd endured with gritted teeth. The car was mine, bought and paid for before we met. The retirement accounts were separate, thank God. It could have been worse. We could have been one of those couples who merged everything, who couldn't buy a coffee without consulting each other. Nina had always been independent with money, insisting on keeping her own credit cards and her own savings account. At the time, I'd thought it was smart. Now I realized it had been preparation. By lunch, I'd missed 6 calls from Nina and received a dozen increasingly frantic text messages. "Sam, we need to talk. This is crazy. You can't just empty our account. Mr. Gilroy called me. What are you doing? Call me back." I deleted them without responding. Let her panic. Let her figure out what it felt like to be blindsided by someone you trusted. During the afternoon break, I called the moving company to confirm tomorrow's pickup. Then I called my buddy Jake, who worked construction, asked if he needed help with any weekend projects. Cash under the table, no questions asked. I was going to need the money. My phone rang as I was walking back into the conference room. Nina's name on the cracked screen. I answered on the fourth ring. Sam, thank God. What's going on? Why did you empty our account? Her voice was tight with panic, but I could hear something else underneath. Guilt. Fear. The sound of someone whose secret had been blown wide open. You wanted separation? I said, keeping my voice level. I'm giving you what you asked for. That's not what I meant. I meant we should talk, maybe see a counselor, figure out how to fix this. Fix what, exactly? Silence on the other end. I could hear traffic in the background, the sound of a car door slamming. Our marriage, Sam. We've been growing apart, and I thought maybe some time to think. How long have you been sleeping with Dan? The words came out harder than I'd intended. A woman walking past me in the hotel corridor glanced over, eyebrows raised. I turned away and lowered my voice. How long, Nina? I don't know what you're talking about. The yoga instructor. Man-bun Dan with the Instagram account and the organic lifestyle. How long have you been screwing him? Sam, you're being paranoid. Dan is my teacher, that's all. He's been helping me work through some personal issues. I bet he has. What kind of personal issues require weekend retreats and late-night phone calls? It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain it to me, Nina. Help me understand why my wife of 18 years decided to blow up our marriage via text message while I was at a work conference. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Colder. More like the Nina I'd been living with for the past 6 months. I need space, Sam. I need to figure out who I am outside of this marriage, outside of being Sam Morrison's wife. And you couldn't figure that out while we were together? You wouldn't understand. Try me. You never listen. You never really see me. It's like I'm just part of the furniture to you. Someone to split the bills with and share a bed with, but not someone you actually care about. The accusation hit harder than I'd expected. Was that really how she saw our marriage? As some kind of business arrangement? That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time we went on a real date? When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my goals, what I wanted out of life? When was the last time you told me you were unhappy instead of running off to yoga class? I tried, Sam. I tried to talk to you about feeling stuck, feeling like I was disappearing into this suburban life we built. But you just made jokes or changed the subject or told me I was being dramatic. I closed my eyes, trying to remember those conversations. Had there been warning signs I'd missed? Cries for help I'd ignored? Maybe. But that didn't excuse what she'd done. So you decided to have an affair instead of working on our marriage. It's not an affair. Dan and I haven't. We're just friends. He listens to me. He sees me as a person, not just a role I'm supposed to play. Right. And that's why you're asking for separation. Because you're just friends. Sam, please, come home. Let's talk about this like adults. I am coming home, tomorrow. And when I do, you'll find out exactly what separation looks like. I hung up before she could respond. The moving truck was already at our apartment building when I pulled into the parking lot. 2 guys in coveralls were loading my couch onto the lift, the same couch Nina and I had picked out together 5 years ago after saving up for 6 months. It looked smaller outside, less significant. Mrs. Patterson from 3B was watching from her balcony, not even pretending to water her plants. Mr. Gilroy stood by the building entrance, arms crossed, supervising the operation like he was directing a military exercise. "Sam!" he called as I got out of my car. "Your wife's been calling me all morning. She's not happy about this." "Where is she?" "At work, I think. She came by around 7, tried to stop the movers. Had to explain that you're primary on the lease, your name's on the moving contract. Nothing I could do. I nodded and headed for the truck. The movers had done good work. Everything I'd listed was there. My furniture, my clothes, my books, my tools, the television, the sound system, even the coffee maker Nina had given me for Christmas 3 years ago. That everything? I asked the crew chief. Everything on the list. Left the ladies' stuff like you asked. Bedroom furniture, kitchen table, her clothes and personal items. What about the note? Left it on the kitchen counter. Perfect. I'd spent 20 minutes crafting that note, trying to strike the right tone. Not angry, not pleading, just matter of fact. Nina, you wanted space to figure things out. I'm giving you all the space you need. The lease is terminated effective 30 days from today. The utilities will be shut off next Friday. I've moved my things to storage. You'll need to make your own arrangements. Sam P.S. I left the vacuum. You always said I never helped with cleaning. The last line was petty, but I couldn't resist. Nina had been complaining about my housekeeping skills for years, despite the fact that I worked 50-hour weeks while she had a flexible schedule and worked from home 2 days a week. I signed the moving paperwork and watched the truck disappear around the corner. 18 years of shared possessions, reduced to a storage unit on the outskirts of town. My phone buzzed. Nina again. Sam, this is insane. You can't just move out without talking to me. I typed back. You wanted separation. I'm separated. That's not what I meant, and you know it. What did you mean exactly? No response. I waited 5 minutes, then put the phone away and headed for my car. I had work to do. Mick's gym was in the old warehouse district, sandwiched between a tattoo parlor and a used auto parts shop. The sign out front just said, Iron, in block letters. No fancy graphics or motivational slogans. Inside it was all business. Free weights, heavy bags, a boxing ring, and the kind of equipment that looked like it had been built to last forever. Mick was behind the counter, reading a paperback novel and eating a sandwich that looked like it could feed a family. He looked up when I walked in, taking in my expression with the kind of quick assessment that came from years of dealing with guys who had problems. You look like shit, he said. Thanks, I feel worse. Beer? It's 2 p.m. So? He reached under the counter and produced 2 bottles of Budweiser, popping them open with a church key that hung from a chain around his neck. The beer was cold and tasted like better times. Want to talk about it? He asked. I told him everything. The text, the phone calls, the moving truck, the yoga instructor with the man bun. Mick listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. So, what's your play? He asked when I finished. I don't know. I've never been divorced before. You're not divorced yet. You're separated. Big difference. She's sleeping with another guy, Mick. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, you're handling this wrong. I looked at him. Wrong how? You're reacting instead of acting. She blindsided you, so you blindsided her back. Tit for tat. Problem is, she's got the advantage now. She knows you're pissed, knows you're hurt. She can plan her next move while you're still trying to figure out what game you're playing. What would you do? Mick finished his beer and set the empty bottle on the counter. I'd find out exactly what I was dealing with before I made any more moves. Right now, you're assuming she's having an affair, but you don't know for sure. You're assuming this Dan guy is the problem, but maybe he's just a symptom. Maybe the real problem is something else entirely. Like what? Like maybe your wife's friend Ava is stirring up shit for her own reasons. Like maybe Nina's going through some kind of midlife crisis, and this yoga thing is just her way of acting out. Like maybe she's testing you, seeing how you'll react. I hadn't considered any of those possibilities. In my mind, the situation was simple. Nina was cheating, I was the victim, and the only question was how much it was going to cost me in the divorce. How do I find out? You investigate, carefully, quietly. You gather information before you make accusations. You figure out who your real enemies are before you start shooting. I'm not a private investigator. No, but you're not stupid either. You've got eyes and ears. You know how to ask questions without seeming like you're asking questions, and you've got friends who can help. Like you? Like me, and others. People who see things, who hear things. This town's not that big, Sam. Secrets don't stay secret for long if you know where to look. I felt something loosen in my chest, the first hint of hope I'd had since reading Nina's text. Maybe I wasn't as helpless as I'd thought. Maybe there was a way to take control of this situation instead of just reacting to it. What do I do first? First, you find out where your wife is really spending her time. Those yoga retreats, those late nights at work, those shopping trips with Ava. Start there. And then? Then you find out what Dan, the yoga instructor, is really about. Is he a serial homewrecker? Is he targeting married women? Is he running some kind of scam? Or is he just a guy who got caught up in something bigger than he expected? And Ava? Ava's the wild card. She's the one who's been talking about your separation in bars, spreading the word around town. That could be innocent gossip, or it could be something else. Either way, she knows more than she's letting on. I nodded, feeling more focused than I had since this whole thing started. Mick was right. I'd been reacting emotionally instead of thinking strategically. Time to change that. I'll need a place to stay while I figure this out. I've got a room upstairs. Nothing fancy, but it's private and it's cheap. I can pay. I know you can. Question is, how long you planning to stay separated from your wife? I thought about Nina's text message, about the coldness in her voice during our phone call, about 18 years of marriage reduced to a storage unit and a forwarded address. However long it takes. The room above Mick's gym was exactly what he'd promised. Nothing fancy, but private and cheap. A single bed, a dresser, a hot plate, and a bathroom down the hall that I shared with whoever else was renting space in the building. It smelled like old sweat and disinfectant, with undertones of the Chinese restaurant next door. It was perfect. Anonymous, temporary, and most importantly, somewhere Nina would never think to look for me. I spent my first night there lying awake, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of the city. Traffic on the main drag, sirens in the distance, the occasional shout or laugh from the street below. It was the opposite of our quiet suburban apartment, where the loudest sound was usually the neighbor's dog barking at the mail truck. Nina had texted me 6 more times, each message more desperate than the last. Sam, please call me. We need to talk. This is crazy. You're throwing away 18 years over a misunderstanding. I went by the apartment. You took everything. How am I supposed to live here? Fine. Be childish. But we still need to discuss practical things. Tess's tuition, the bills, our taxes. I'm not the enemy here, Sam. I'm your wife. Call me back. Please. I read each one twice, looking for clues, for hints about what she was really thinking. The progression was interesting. Panic, anger, self-pity, practical concerns, emotional manipulation. Classic Nina, trying different approaches until she found one that worked. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I started investigating. The yoga studio was called Mindful Bodies, and it occupied the ground floor of a converted mill building in the Arts District. Lots of exposed brick and reclaimed wood, with motivational quotes painted on the walls and the kind of ambient music that sounded like whales having intimacy. I watched it for 3 days, learning the rhythm of the place. Nina's regular classes were Tuesday and Thursday evenings, Saturday mornings. Dan taught 5 classes a week, plus private sessions that seemed to run long and involve a lot of one-on-one attention. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of lean build that came from yoga and careful eating rather than serious weight training. The man bun was real, as were the expensive workout clothes and the Tesla parked in the instructor's spot. On Thursday, I followed Nina to class. She arrived 15 minutes early, parking her Honda next to the Tesla and checking her appearance in the rearview mirror before going inside. She was wearing new workout clothes, stuff I'd never seen before. Tight leggings that showed off her ass, a sports bra that pushed up her tits, hair pulled back in a way that made her look 10 years younger. She looked good, better than she had in months. There was an energy about her, an excitement that I hadn't seen since the early days of our marriage. I watched through the window as the class began. Dan moved around the room, adjusting poses, placing his hands on students' bodies to guide their movements. When he got to Nina, he spent extra time with her, his hands lingering on her hips, her shoulders, the small of her back. She smiled at him. Not the polite smile she gave to checkout clerks or neighbors, but the real smile, the one that lit up her whole face, the smile she used to give me. After class, I watched Nina and Dan talk by the front desk. Their body language was intimate, familiar. They stood closer than teacher and student should stand. When he said something that made her laugh, she touched his arm. Then Ava showed up. I'd seen Nina's best friend plenty of times over the years, at parties and work events and the occasional double date. She was attractive in an aggressive way, with short blonde hair and the kind of confidence that came from being successful in a male-dominated field. She worked in corporate HR, specializing in what she called people management, and what everyone else called firing people without getting sued. Ava hugged Nina, then shook hands with Dan. The three of them talked for several minutes, and I could see Ava gesturing animatedly, like she was telling a story or making a point. Dan laughed at something she said. Nina looked less amused. When they finally separated, Nina and Ava walked to their cars together. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their conversation looked intense. Ava did most of the talking, with Nina nodding and occasionally shaking her head. Dan, meanwhile, went back inside the studio. Through the window, I could see him talking to the receptionist, a young woman with purple hair and enough piercings to set off a metal detector. They seemed friendly, very friendly, interesting. I followed Ava when she left the parking lot. She drove across town to a wine bar called Crush, one of those places that catered to young professionals with disposable income and relationship problems. I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, Ava came out with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, dark hair, expensive suit. They were laughing about something, and when they reached her car, he pushed her against the driver's side door and kissed her hard enough to fog up the windows. Not Dan. Someone else entirely. I took pictures with my phone, making sure to get clear shots of both their faces. Then I followed them to a hotel downtown, the kind of place that charged by the hour and didn't ask questions about names or credit cards. They were inside for 90 minutes. When Ava finally emerged, she was alone. She checked her appearance in her phone's camera, smoothed her hair, and drove away. The man came out 10 minutes later, got into a BMW with corporate plates, and headed in the opposite direction. I ran the plates when I got back to my room. The car was registered to Pinnacle Marketing, Nina's company, which meant Ava was sleeping with someone from Nina's office while encouraging Nina to blow up her marriage for a yoga instructor. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they formed didn't make sense yet. I needed more information. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the address listed for Dan's home residence. It was a condo complex in the trendy part of town, all glass and steel and environmental sustainability. His unit was on the 3rd floor, with a balcony overlooking the river. I parked across the street and settled in to wait. At 9 a.m., Dan left for the studio, driving his Tesla like he was auditioning for a car commercial. At 9:15, a woman let herself into his condo, using her own key. Not Nina, not the purple-haired receptionist. Someone new. She was there for 2 hours. When she left, I followed her to a Whole Foods, where she shopped for organic vegetables and free-range chicken, like she was planning to cook dinner for someone special. I approached her in the parking lot. "Excuse me," I said, putting on my most harmless smile. "I think you know my friend Dan, from the yoga studio?" She looked at me suspiciously. "Maybe. Why?" I'm thinking about taking his class, but I wanted to get a recommendation from someone who knows him personally. You know how it is with yoga instructors. Some of them are all about the spiritual stuff. Others are just in it for the workout. Her expression softened. Oh, Dan's great. Really focused on the mind-body connection. Very hands-on with his teaching. That's good to hear. How long have you been studying with him? About 8 months. He's been incredibly helpful with my practice. Very attentive to individual needs. I bet. Are you in his regular classes, or do you do private sessions? She blushed slightly. Both. The private sessions are really where you see the most improvement. I'm sure they are. Well, thanks for the recommendation. No problem. I'm sure you'll love working with Dan. He has a way of making you feel like you're the only student in the room. I drove away with a sick feeling in my stomach. Dan wasn't just sleeping with Nina. He was running a whole stable of married women, using the yoga studio as his personal hunting ground, and somehow Ava was involved in the operation. But why? What did she get out of it? I was about to find out. I found my answer that evening at Murphy's Pub, a dive bar 3 blocks from Mick's gym. I was nursing a beer and trying to make sense of everything I'd learned when I heard familiar voices from the booth behind me. She's completely lost her mind, Ava was saying. Moving out, emptying bank accounts, acting like some kind of wronged hero. It's pathetic. Maybe he found out about Dan, another woman replied. I recognized the voice, Jennifer from Nina's office, someone I'd met at company Christmas parties. He doesn't know anything for sure. He's just being dramatic. Men always think everything is about them. But what if he does know? What if he's been watching her? Then we stick to the plan. Nina gets her divorce, I get her promotion, and everyone wins. Except Sam. Screw Sam. He's been holding Nina back for years. Dead weight. She deserves better. And Dan? What happens to him when this is over? Ava laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Dan's a useful idiot. He thinks he's some kind of spiritual guru, but really he's just a bastard with a yoga certification. When Nina doesn't need him anymore, she'll figure that out. That seems cruel. That's business, honey. Sometimes you have to break a few hearts to get what you want. I sat perfectly still, processing what I'd heard. Ava wasn't just Nina's friend encouraging her to leave me. She was orchestrating the whole thing, using Dan as a weapon to destroy my marriage so she could take Nina's job. But why Nina's job specifically? Nina worked in corporate communications, writing press releases and managing social media accounts. It was decent work, but nothing worth destroying a marriage over, unless there was something about the job I didn't know. I left money on the bar and slipped out before Ava could see me. Back in my room, I fired up my laptop and started researching Pinnacle Marketing, Nina's company. What I found made everything click into place. Pinnacle had just landed a massive contract with the state government, worth $30 million over 5 years. The contract required someone with specific experience in crisis communications and public relations, someone exactly like Nina. But Nina was married, stable, unlikely to relocate or work the kind of hours the contract would demand. Ava, on the other hand, was single, ambitious, and willing to do whatever it took to advance her career, including destroying her best friend's marriage. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mixture of rage and admiration. It was a brilliant plan, really. Use Dan to seduce Nina, encourage her to leave me, then position herself as the obvious replacement when Nina's personal life became too complicated for her to handle the new contract. Nina had no idea she was being manipulated. She thought she was having some kind of spiritual awakening, discovering her true self through yoga and mindfulness. In reality, she was just a pawn in Ava's corporate power play. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I could tell Nina the truth, show her the evidence I'd gathered. But would she believe me? Or would she think I was just a desperate husband trying to win her back with conspiracy theories? I could confront Ava directly, let her know I was onto her scheme, but that would just make her more careful, more dangerous. Or I could beat her at her own game. I spent the rest of the night planning. The next morning, I called Nina. Sam? Oh my God. I've been trying to reach you for days. Where are you staying? We need to talk, I said, ignoring her question. In person. Yes, absolutely. Can you come to the apartment? I've been thinking about what you said, about us growing apart, and I think you're right. I think we need counseling or maybe a vacation, something to reconnect. Not the apartment. Somewhere neutral. How about that coffee shop on Elm Street, the one with the outdoor seating? Okay, when? 1 hour. I hung up before she could ask more questions. The coffee shop was busy with the lunch crowd, which was perfect. Lots of witnesses, lots of background noise. Nina was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee and a nervous expression. She looked tired. The excitement I'd seen at the yoga studio was gone, replaced by dark circles under her eyes and the kind of tension that came from sleepless nights and unanswered questions. Sam, she said as I sat down, I'm so glad you called. I've been going crazy not knowing where you were or if you were okay. Have you? Of course I have. You're my husband. I love you. Funny way of showing it. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I know you're angry. I know I handled this badly. But I was scared, confused. I didn't know how to talk to you about what I was feeling. What were you feeling exactly? Like I was disappearing. Like I was just going through the motions of being your wife without remembering why I wanted to be married in the first place. So you decided to sleep with your yoga instructor. I'm not sleeping with Dan. Right. You're just spending all your free time with him, taking private lessons, going on weekend retreats. But you're not sleeping with him. It's not like that. Dan is helping me rediscover myself. He's teaching me about mindfulness, about being present in my own life instead of just existing. And that requires you to ask for separation from your husband? Nina looked down at her coffee cup, not meeting my eyes. Ava thought it would be good for me to have some space to figure things out, to make sure I was staying in the marriage for the right reasons. Ava thought. Interesting. What else does Ava think you should do? She's been a good friend, Sam. She's been there for me when I needed someone to talk to. I'm sure she has. Tell me, what does Ava think about your job? About the new state contract? Nina looked up sharply. How do you know about that? It's not a secret, is it? $30 million over 5 years. Big opportunity for someone in corporate communications. I haven't decided if I want it. It would mean longer hours, more travel, more stress. And Ava? Would she want it? I don't know. Maybe. She's certainly qualified. Especially if you were too distracted by personal problems to handle it yourself. Nina stared at me for a long moment. What are you saying? I'm saying your best friend is playing you, Nina. She's using Dan to break up our marriage so she can take your job. That's ridiculous. Is it? When did Ava first suggest you try yoga? Right around the time Pinnacle started bidding on the state contract, wasn't it? And when did she start encouraging you to question our marriage? Right around the time the contract was awarded? You're being paranoid. Am I? Let me ask you something else. How well do you know Dan? I mean, really know him, not just the spiritual guru persona he puts on for his students. Well enough. Do you know about the other women? The married women he's been giving private lessons to? The ones who think they're special? Think they're the only ones getting his personal attention? Nina's face went pale. You're lying. I have pictures, Nina. I have names. Dan isn't some enlightened teacher helping you find yourself. He's a predator who targets vulnerable married women. And Ava knows it. She's been feeding him information about you, setting you up. I don't believe you. Then ask her. Ask Ava about the man she's been meeting at hotels downtown. Ask her about her own affair with someone from your office. Ask her what she really thinks about your marriage, about your job, about your future. Nina stood up abruptly, knocking over her coffee cup. The liquid spread across the table, dripping onto the ground. You're sick, Sam. You're so desperate to avoid taking responsibility for our problems that you're making up conspiracy theories. Ava is my friend. Dan is helping me grow as a person. And you're just angry because you can't control me anymore. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at me. I want a divorce, Sam, not a separation. A divorce. I'll have papers drawn up by the end of the week. She walked away without another word, leaving me sitting alone with the spilled coffee and the stares of other customers. But I wasn't discouraged. If anything, I was encouraged. Nina's reaction told me everything I needed to know. She was scared, defensive, lashing out because part of her knew I was right. Now I just had to prove it. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Nina called me at 2 a.m., sobbing so hard I could barely understand what she was saying. Sam, can you come pick me up? Where are you? Dan's place. Something happened, something bad. I was dressed and in my car within 5 minutes. The drive to Dan's condo took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. I found Nina sitting on the curb outside the building, still wearing her yoga clothes, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She got into my car without saying anything. I waited for her to speak. You were right, she finally whispered. About everything. What happened? I went to see Dan tonight, to ask him about what you said about the other women. He denied it at first, said you were just a jealous husband trying to cause trouble. But then his phone kept buzzing, text messages, and he was acting weird, nervous. So I grabbed his phone when he went to the bathroom. She pulled out her own phone and showed me screenshots. Messages from multiple women, all married, all talking about their private sessions with Dan. Intimate messages, explicit photos. There were dozens of them, Sam. Dozens. All thinking they were special, all thinking they had some kind of spiritual connection with him. I'm sorry. And then I found the messages with Ava. She swiped to a different conversation. This one was all business. Ava giving Dan information about Nina's schedule, her emotional state, her marriage problems. Dan reporting back on his progress, on how close he was to getting Nina to leave me. She's been planning this for months, Nina said. Using him, using me, all for that job. What did Dan say when you confronted him? He tried to play it off like it was no big deal. Said I was overreacting, that his relationship with other students didn't affect what we had together. Then he said maybe I wasn't as evolved as he thought I was. Classy. That's when I really lost it. I started yelling, throwing things. The neighbors called the cops. Are you in trouble? No charges. Dan didn't want the publicity. But the police report will be public record. If Ava finds out, she'll use it against you at work. Nina nodded miserably. I'm screwed, Sam. My marriage is destroyed. My best friend betrayed me. My job is probably gone. And I've been sleeping with a sociopath who's been manipulating me for months. You were sleeping with him. Not for long. Just a few times. And it was terrible. All that tantric bullshit he talks about. He lasts about 30 seconds and then wants to discuss chakras. Despite everything, I almost smiled. That's more than I needed to know. I'm sorry, Sam. I'm so sorry. You tried to warn me, and I wouldn't listen. I called you paranoid and sick, and I was the one who was blind. We sat in silence for several minutes. I could hear sirens in the distance, the sound of the city going about its business while my world shifted on its axis. What do you want to do? I finally asked. I want to go home. I want to pretend the last 6 months never happened. I want to wake up next to my husband and remember why I married him in the first place. It's not that simple. I know, I screwed up. I screwed up everything. But maybe we can fix it? Maybe we can go to counseling or therapy or whatever it takes? I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She looked young and scared and broken. Like the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago, before life got complicated and marriage became routine and we both forgot how to talk to each other. Maybe, I said. But first, we need to deal with Ava. What do you mean? She destroyed our marriage for a job promotion. She used your friendship, your insecurities, your trust. She needs to pay for that. Sam, I just want this to be over. It's not over until she faces consequences. Otherwise, she wins. She gets your job, destroys your marriage, and moves on to her next victim. Nina wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time for some payback. The plan was simple, elegant, and completely legal. It would require perfect timing, careful coordination, and a little bit of luck. But if it worked, Ava would get exactly what she deserved. The first step was gathering evidence. Nina still had access to Ava's text messages through a shared cloud account they'd set up years ago to coordinate work projects. We spent the next day downloading everything: messages with Dan, messages about me, messages about Nina's job, messages about the state contract. The second step was setting the trap. Nina called Ava and asked to meet for drinks, said she needed to talk about everything that had happened with Dan. Ava agreed immediately, probably thinking she could spin the situation to her advantage. They met at Crush, the same wine bar where I'd followed Ava before. I was there too, sitting at the bar with a baseball cap pulled low and a newspaper for cover. I can't believe Dan turned out to be such a creep, Ava was saying. I'm so sorry, honey. I thought he was different. It's not your fault, Nina replied. You were just trying to help me figure things out. Still, I feel responsible. If I hadn't introduced you to yoga, none of this would have happened. Actually, I've been thinking about that. About how you introduced me to Dan right around the time I started having problems with Sam. It's like you knew exactly what I needed. Ava's smile flickered slightly. Just good timing, I guess. Or good planning. What do you mean? Nina pulled out her phone and placed it on the table between them. On the screen was a text message from Ava to Dan. Nina's feeling vulnerable about her marriage. Now would be a good time to make your move. Ava stared at the phone for a long moment. When she looked up, her expression had changed completely. The fake concern was gone, replaced by cold calculation. You went through my messages. I went through my messages. We shared that account, remember? For work projects. That was private. Was it? Because it looks like you've been sharing my private information with Dan for months. My schedule, my problems with Sam, my insecurities about our marriage. Nina, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Just like you can explain why you've been meeting with David from corporate strategy at hotels downtown. Just like you can explain why you encouraged me to ask for separation right before the state contract was finalized. Ava's face went white. You don't understand. That job should have been mine from the beginning. I have more experience, more qualifications. You only got considered because you're married, because they thought you were stable. So you decided to make me unstable. I gave you what you wanted. You were miserable in your marriage, Nina. Anyone could see that. I just helped you realize it. By manipulating me. By using my friendship, my trust. By opening your eyes. Sam was holding you back, keeping you small. You're better off without him. That wasn't your decision to make. Ava leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. You think Sam is some kind of victim here? You think he's innocent? He's been investigating us for weeks, Nina, following you, following me, taking pictures. He's obsessed, probably dangerous. He was protecting himself, protecting us. He knew something was wrong even when I was too blind to see it. He's turned you against me. No, Ava, you did that yourself. Nina stood up, leaving her drink untouched. I'm going back to my husband. I'm going to try to fix what you helped me break. And I'm going to make sure everyone at Pinnacle knows exactly what kind of person you really are. She walked away, leaving Ava alone at the table with the evidence of her betrayal glowing on the phone screen. I waited 10 minutes, then followed Ava outside. She was in the parking lot, talking frantically on her phone, probably calling David or Dan or whoever else was part of her network. Ava, I called out. She spun around, phone still pressed to her ear. When she saw me, her expression went from surprise to fear to rage in the space of a heartbeat. You, she spat. You stalker. Just a concerned husband looking out for his family. Nina made her own choices. I didn't force her to do anything. No, you just manipulated her into thinking those choices were her idea. Very clever. Very cruel. She was unhappy, Sam. Miserable. I gave her permission to admit it. You gave her a weapon to destroy her marriage, for a job, for a career, for a future, something you never could have given her. I stepped closer, close enough to see the fear in her eyes despite her defiant words. Here's what's going to happen, Ava. Nina's going back to work on Monday. She's going to tell her boss exactly what you did, show him the messages, explain how you sabotaged her marriage to position yourself for the state contract. Then she's going to file a complaint with HR about workplace harassment and hostile environment. They'll never believe her. It's her word against mine. Is it? Because I think Dan might be very interested in making a deal when he finds out he's facing potential charges for stalking and intimate harassment. I think he might have a lot to say about your role in his little operation. You can't prove anything. I can prove enough. And even if I couldn't, the court of public opinion is a powerful thing. Word gets around, people talk. Your reputation, your career, your future, all of it depends on people trusting you. What happens when they don't? Ava's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I saw her face crumple. What is it? I asked. David, he's ending things. Says it's too risky now that you know. Rat's abandoning ship. Screw you, Sam. No, Ava, screw you. You destroyed my marriage, manipulated my wife, and tried to ruin my life for a job promotion. But you know what? You failed. Nina and I are going to work things out. We're going to be stronger than before. And you're going to be alone, unemployed, and unemployable. I turned to walk away, then stopped. Oh, and Ava? Stay away from my family. If I see you near Nina, near our apartment, near anywhere we might be, I'll make your life so miserable you'll wish you'd never heard the name Morrison. I left her standing in the parking lot, phone clutched in her shaking hands, the ruins of her carefully laid plans scattered around her feet like broken glass. Monday morning, Nina walked into Pinnacle Marketing with a folder full of evidence and a story that would end Ava's career. By noon, Ava had been suspended pending investigation. By the end of the week, she was fired for violation of company ethics policies and potential criminal misconduct. Dan's yoga studio closed 2 weeks later when 3 of his former students filed intimate harassment complaints, and the local newspaper ran an exposé about his predatory behavior. He left town quietly, probably to find another group of vulnerable women to manipulate. Nina kept her job and got the state contract. She also got a commendation from her boss for handling a difficult situation with professionalism and integrity. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, but the real work was just beginning. We started couples therapy the following month. Dr. Sarah Chen was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in marriages recovering from infidelity and betrayal. She didn't let us get away with anything. You both failed each other, she told us during our 3rd session. Nina, you chose to have an affair instead of addressing your marital problems directly. Sam, you chose to investigate and plot revenge instead of fighting for your marriage. Neither of you communicated honestly about what you were feeling or what you needed. But Ava manipulated the whole situation, Nina protested. Ava took advantage of existing problems in your marriage. She couldn't have succeeded if your relationship had been strong to begin with. It was hard to hear, but it was true. Nina and I had been drifting apart for years, going through the motions of marriage without really connecting. The affair was a symptom, not the disease. We worked on communication, on trust, on remembering why we'd fallen in love in the first place. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, arguments, nights when one or both of us wondered if we were just postponing the inevitable. But slowly, gradually, we found our way back to each other. Nina quit yoga permanently, but she found other ways to stay active and explore her interests. She took up photography, joined a hiking club, started volunteering at the animal shelter. I supported her new pursuits, even when they meant less time together. I'd learned that trying to control someone you love is the fastest way to lose them. I moved back into our apartment 6 months after Nina's text message had started this whole mess. We'd renewed the lease and bought new furniture together, creating a space that felt fresh and hopeful rather than haunted by old resentments. Our daughter Tess came home for Christmas that year, curious about what had happened between her parents, but wise enough not to pry too deeply. She could see that we were different, more attentive to each other, more deliberate about our relationship. "You guys seem happy," she said one evening, as we were decorating the tree. "We're working on it," Nina replied, catching my eye across the room. "Good," Tess said. "I was worried for a while there. You both seemed so distant." She was right. We had been distant, but distance could be crossed if both people were willing to make the journey. On New Year's Eve, Nina and I went to Murphy's Pub, the same dive bar where I'd overheard Ava plotting against us. We sat in the same booth, drinking beer and talking about our plans for the coming year. "Do you ever regret it?" Nina asked. "Not leaving me, I mean. It would have been easier, cleaner. Do you regret not going through with the divorce?" "Sometimes. When therapy gets hard, when we're fighting about something stupid, when I remember how simple things seemed when I thought Dan was the answer to all my problems." But simple isn't the same as right, and easy isn't the same as good. I raised my beer bottle in a toast, to complicated and difficult. "To marriage," she replied, clinking her bottle against mine. Outside, fireworks exploded over the city, bright bursts of color against the dark sky. Inside, my wife and I sat together in a dive bar, planning our future and trying to forget our past. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I'd first read Nina's text message. It wasn't the revenge fantasy I'd constructed during those angry nights above Mick's gym. But it was real, and it was ours, and it was enough. 6 months later, we got a wedding invitation in the mail. Dan was marrying someone named Crystal, a 25-year-old yoga instructor from Portland. The wedding was going to be held at a retreat center in Costa Rica, with a reception featuring organic food and meditation sessions. Nina and I read the invitation together, sitting at our kitchen table with coffee and the Sunday paper spread between us. "Should we send a gift?" Nina asked with a perfectly straight face. "I'm thinking a book on fidelity," I replied. "Or maybe a GPS tracker for his car." "You're terrible. You married me. Twice, if you count staying married as a choice." "I do." She leaned across the table and kissed me, tasting like coffee and promises. Outside our window, the city hummed with life and possibility. Inside our apartment, 2 people who had almost lost everything were building something new from the pieces of something old. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was honest, and it was fought for, and it was ours. We threw Dan's wedding invitation in the trash and went back to reading the paper, planning our day, living our complicated, difficult, beautiful life together. 6 weeks after that, I was taking out the garbage when I saw a familiar figure across the street. Ava, standing by a beat-up Honda with a "for sale" sign in the window, talking to a potential buyer. She looked different, older, tired, wearing clothes that had seen better days. Her hair was longer, less styled. Her confidence was gone, replaced by the hunched shoulders and quick glances of someone who'd learned to expect disappointment. Our eyes met across the street. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she said something to the buyer and walked over to where I was standing. "Sam. Ava. I heard you and Nina worked things out." "We did." "Good. I'm glad, really." I studied her face, looking for sarcasm or manipulation, but found only genuine exhaustion. "Are you?" I asked. "Yeah. What I did was wrong. Selfish. I destroyed a lot of people's lives for something that wasn't even worth it in the end." "The job?" "The job, the affair, all of it. I thought I was being smart, strategic. Really, I was just being cruel." What are you doing now? Waiting tables at a diner on Route 9, living in a studio apartment above a dry cleaner, trying to figure out how to start over at 42. I'm sorry. No, you're not. And you shouldn't be. I earned this. She was right. I wasn't sorry. But I wasn't glad either. Mostly, I just felt tired. Tired of anger, tired of revenge, tired of carrying around the weight of what had happened. For what it's worth, she said, I think you and Nina are lucky to have each other. Not everyone gets a second chance. Not everyone deserves one. No, they don't. She walked back to her car, said something to the buyer that made him shake his head and walk away. Then she got in the Honda and drove off, leaving me standing alone with my garbage bags and my complicated feelings about justice and forgiveness. When I got back inside, Nina was making dinner, humming along to a song on the radio. She looked up when I came in, smiled, and went back to chopping vegetables. Everything okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, and meant it. Everything's okay. That night, we had dinner together, watched a movie, made love with the kind of passion that comes from almost losing something precious. We talked about our day, our plans for the weekend, the small details that make up a shared life. We didn't talk about Ava or Dan or the months when our marriage had hung by a thread. We didn't need to. That chapter was closed, filed away with all the other challenges we'd survived together. Instead, we talked about the future, about the vacation we were planning, about Tess's upcoming graduation, about the possibility of renewing our vows on our 20th anniversary, about all the tomorrows stretching out ahead of us, uncertain but full of possibility. As I drifted off to sleep that night, Nina's hand in mine, I thought about the text message that had started it all. Just FYI, told everyone we're separated for now. For now. At the time, those words had felt like a death sentence. Now they seemed almost prophetic. We had been separated in all the ways that mattered. But for now had become forever, and forever was exactly as long as I wanted to be married to Nina Morrison. The alarm clock glowed 11:47 p.m. In 13 minutes, it would be a new day. Another chance to get it right, to choose each other, to build something worth keeping. I closed my eyes and listened to my wife breathing beside me, steady and sure as a heartbeat. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to fail or succeed. But tonight, we were together. Tonight, we were home. Tonight, for now, meant forever.